Imagine a workplace where every employee feels valued, engaged, and inspired. Welcome to Incredible Workplaces, where exceptional work cultures are recognized and celebrated. Incredible Workplaces is dedicated to evaluating and certifying organizations that prioritize employee well-being, engagement, and inclusivity. Our assessments are grounded in the PULSE framework, promoting values and beliefs, unified communication, leadership development, supportive environment, and environment for innovation and adaptability. We offer 2 certification levels: Gold, focusing on self-evaluation, and Platinum, which includes comprehensive employee feedback for a holistic view of your workplace culture. Achieving certification enhances your employer brand, attracts top talent, and fosters a culture of continuous improvement. Beyond certification, we provide access to exclusive events, best practices, and a community committed to workplace excellence. Our certification programs are competitively priced to provide value for organizations of all sizes. Join the ranks of organizations committed to excellence. Visit IncredibleWorkplaces.com to start your certification journey today.
Super excited that we are Incredible Workplaces certified.
We are feeling pride to be certified as Incredible Workplace Organization.
We are very happy to be certified from Incredible Workplace.
Feeling proud to be recognized as Incredible Workplace Certified Organization.
Let's create workplaces incredible with Incredible Workplaces. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our episode 7 of the Culture Connect. It is a show where we bring you the global leaders across the globe and talk about how they are impacting the work culture that we have. So today, I'm very happy to introduce to you Brendan Carson, who is the Chief Learning Officer of Docebo. And he is going to talk with us about how the learning, it can be one of the way to impact culture. So first of all, welcome Brendan to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Same here. So Brendan, before we start, Docebo is a name that is definitely there in the learning space, but would you like to tell about your own journey of how you started and to the time that you are today with Docebo as Chief Learning Officer?
Sure, I would love to share my journey. I've spent most of my career in learning and development. It's 25 years now in this career. It was an accidental career. I was a developer and designer of college textbooks, so educational material. And by the way, even before that, my professional life, in my personal life, I'm a 5th generation printer. So all the men in my family going back 5 generations were printers as well. So we've always been in the area or the focus of communication and connecting, if you will. So my L&D role, although it's accidental, it spawned from that experience designing college textbooks, where I began to create an interactive tutorial for the college textbook that we were creating. I was designing that. And then that sort of turned into a love for educational multimedia and what we now call, or what we then called, computer-based training, which is now turned into digital learning online. That was happening right at the time of the internet. So, and I've evolved my journey. I've had roles at almost every level of learning and development across very large, complex companies, from airlines to retail to technology. But one thing has always been true. Learning is never just about training. It's about shaping how people think, lead, and grow. So I've had a fantastic career so far. I jumped back into educational technology and software as a service by coming to Docebo in January of this year as its first chief learning officer. And so my role here is to help guide companies and large organizations as well on their journey to become learning companies. So in today's fast-moving AI-powered world, there's a lot of change happening, a lot of evolution in the business, but also for the workplace. And so my role is to help make the path and the journey to an AI-powered learning company be a little bit more easy and or a little easier and a little more streamlined for our clients and customers. So it's been quite a journey the last 20-something years.
That's really awesome. And that's really connects with one of the conversations that I was having with the HR leader from one of the IT company in India. And we were talking about that how majority of HRs are accidental HRs.
Exactly.
But nowadays, I think it's a global phenomena, because many places when I was working with global organizations, there I also saw that maybe in the beginning people never thought that they would come into HR, but kind of some incidences happened and they gradually moved to HR. But they come up as one of the great HR leaders as well. So great to hear the story, and I know about Docebo and how they are helping organizations in building a learning organization. So great work also there. So before I move on, as we have a lot of audience that have joined with us live right now, I would request my audience to ask any question they want to ask Brendan. We have 45 minutes together, and we will try to take as much as questions we can from you. But if not, then Brendan has agreed to find some time after this conversation, watch the recorded video and try to answer those questions personally to you on the recorded version. So yeah. Great, and thank you, Brendan, for sharing your story with us. And I think that is very helpful for audience to connect with you. As incredible workplaces, we do believe that one of the key element of work culture is actually developing your employees and building a culture where people are constantly learning, because it's never stopping process, right? And learning has changed a lot from classroom trainings to many other digital, and now micro learnings and a lot of new things are coming up in the learning space. And I'm always fascinated about how learning is impacting the culture of the organization. In my view, it does impact a lot. But let me hear from you, Brendan, as you're working as a CLO. What is your opinion? How does L&D or learning helps and impact the building the culture of the organization?
Yes, so I agree 100% with you, but there are some nuances to this that we must understand and grasp so that we can drive organizational change in some respect. One thing to think about is, when we think about corporate learning, it has evolved quite a bit since its inception. And in its inception, it was designed to help people be better at the work as the work was designed. And so our roles in some respect were similar to how it was in the manufacturing age era, where workers were needed to be trained to complete tightly routine and specific tasks. And so we were doing what I would call transactional training. We're training people to be better at the job they're in. And that worked really well for us. If you look at the manufacturing era, how we developed the global supply chain and how we were really focused on increasing productivity and efficiency at scale. So that was really great. But I'll tell you that the next 5 years will be more transformative for corporate learning and development than the last 50. And that's because work has evolved and changed exponentially. And so when you think about even COVID and right before COVID and during COVID, we were undergoing this thing I call the technology tsunami. And so the meaning of work was changing. What people want from work was changing. And so because of that, we have to change, those of us that create learning and development. And one thing I'll share is learning isn't a program per per se. It's a mindset embedded into how the company operates. And so this is actually our new operating model. And so what we're doing is we're transitioning away from scalable efficiency, which is the manufacturing era work operating model. We're moving towards what we call scalable learning as the new work operating model. And for example, if you take the biggest example I have of a company that has successfully made this transition from scalable efficiency to scalable learning is Microsoft. Satya Nadella came in as the CEO of Microsoft 11 years ago in 2014. And he realized that there was a cultural shift that needed to be made so that the company could scale to new heights and really embrace the changing world of work. And what he wanted to do was move the culture away from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And that was a tectonic level shift for him to do. But since his tenure, over the 11 years he's been in role as leader of the company, they've become the most valuable company on earth, and their stock has increased by 1,000% since he started. So it's a successful role that he's had, obviously, across his tenure. But that is because he took a large-scaled organization and he asked that we rethink how we do what we do and we change our mindset. And so he focused on embedding learning, and he did that through really targeted but increased investment in learning around across Microsoft. But he embedded learning. He asked his leaders to embed learning into the rituals, the systems, and the conversations, and tied learning directly to Microsoft's value and Microsoft's operating model. So if a company says it values growth and development, you actually have to operationalize that into how people are developed, how they're recognized, how they're rewarded. And so when culture and learning reinforce each other, that's when it becomes real. I often talk about business outcomes on one side, human outcomes on the other side. And if you think of it as two circles that intersect like a Venn diagram, in the middle, you have human performance. And this is the talent flywheel that you get by embedding learning into the organizational culture and making it a part of the DNA or the very fabric of the work operating model. So the move from scalable efficiency to scalable learning is the move that all companies will need to make if they want to, grasp the moment and lead forward in a way that it will go to your competitive advantage as an organization. So I just use that example of what Satya did at Microsoft as something that we all, as leaders in our organizations, regardless of the level we're at, can focus on to embed and integrate learning into the organizational culture.
Yeah, and Ben is so right that I always believe that when we talk about employee engagement and growing the business, we also need to invest on our growth of our employees, because if you are not focusing on their growth and we're expecting them to perform a lot, as you spoke about the diagram, of course, to perform, you need to also make sure that you're up to date with all the skill, technology, or any other thing that you need to do your job better, because in this VUCA world, everything is changing so fast, right? That everybody has to be on toes. There was a time when we used to say that technology companies need to be on their toes to learn new things. I think it is today everybody need to be on their toes to learn new things. And thank you for sharing the example of Microsoft. It's a great example of how a growth mindset can not only make your people prepared, but it also increases the revenue and the profit share in the organization, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I think in a couple of your past conversations, you spoke about technology, and I wanted to touch it because many of our audience really wants to understand how technology is impacting or shaping the way learning is done, right? And who can do better than a CLO of Docebo with us, right? As you are helping organizations with that. So my question to you is AI. Everybody talks about it, right? It's a huge conversation. I don't know how many people really understand it and the impact it could create. But I wanted to know from you how artificial intelligence or the technology, the advanced technology, is changing the way the L&D or the learning is done. So what's your view on that?
No, I love that question. And for the first time in my career, spanning, like I said, 20 plus years, almost 25 years, we now have the ability to scale personalization. And so I've worked at some pretty large companies across my career, and we've always talked about how we build scalability into our products and services. And so by default, most of us do that. But I have flipped what scale means. I have flipped the narrative on that, because now with the power of AI and truly the gift of AI is giving us an amazing gift to scale personalization. And I flipped the narrative because now we can scale to one, which means that that individual can get what they need in the moment that matters for them across their career trajectory, across their experience in their role they're in, and across their day-to-day moments, right? So we can really attach that personalization to them. And by personalization, I don't mean crafting a learning course that might specifically just meet their need. I mean crafting an augmentation to the work they do, but also to who they are and what they aspire to and what they want to achieve. So for the first time in my digital life in learning, so I've been doing that since the inception of the internet for quite some time, AI is gifting us the ability to move away from that one-size-fits-all training. And we've all been a part of that, where we create the digital course, the e-learning course, even the instructor-led experience, whatever it may be, but we're doing it for a broad audience. We're creating things for, several people, more than one. But now we can move away from that one-size-fits-all to that one-size-fits-one experience, which is a highly personalized learning experience. And so it's changing the game, especially for frontline workers, but also for knowledge workers alike. And what's most exciting about the tech really is just what it enables. But one thing I want to be really crystal clear about, we've had a lot of digital technology over the last 25 years. If you think about I don't know how many people in our audience will remember Y2K. Do you remember the experience we all had on Y2K? That New Year's Eve night of 1999, right? When we were concerned about the rollover to the year 2000, would all of our digital technology still work, right? But one thing we've done since that experience of Y2K in just the last, 24, 25 years is we went on a journey and we achieved the single largest transformation in the history of IT, in that we have since moved almost 100% of business data to the cloud. So we created the cloud, and then we moved all of our business operations to the cloud. We did that in about half the time it took to create the internet. And so we've been building this infrastructure, this very robust infrastructure, so that we could have this gift of highly personalized learning, where at either the next generation or the generation after will be born with a digital twin who will be with them for their entire life and help them through the moments that matter from a learning perspective as they grow and achieve their aspirations for what they want to do. So I'm most excited right now about the transformation that AI is bringing us, which is a bit more than just technology. It is a wholesale transformation. And in fact, AI is leading us into the single largest job transformation in human history. And we are the ones helping to architect that and to orchestrate the experiences across for the workforces that we support. So we have a lot of responsibility and candidly accountability in building a culture where people get the right guidance at the right time to be their best self and to perform their best work. And it frees up a lot of the workforce to learn and to be a part of a successful organization that will also help them grow and develop on a human scale, so that they can really be the most successful in whatever they want to be, not even just, the work, but beyond the work. So we're just beginning to understand AI's gift that it's giving us. And we do need to steward a responsible and ethically appropriate development use for it so that it's focused on capability building and adaptability. But this is really all about helping us to achieve the promise, if you will, of how humans should be working, instead of, like I said before, focusing on making humans better at the work as it was designed. What we're doing now is we're making work better for humans as they were designed.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do see a value in having a personalized L&D program for an individual because, of course, everybody's different. And I think AI will be able to support us there. I definitely remember Y2K. I don't know about our audience, but and I can tell I was in college and I was about to graduate from IT, and there was a lot of conversation. And one point in time, it was like that whole system will stop working because when the year will change from 1999 to 2000, our softwares are not designed in a way to take it. I don't know whether you remember that. And nothing happened actually on 1st January 2022 or 2000. Nothing happened. Everything remained the same. But it was one of the greatest fear at that point in time. So I totally remember. I think we have a lot of young audience also here, but if they don't remember, they might have definitely saw some documentary on Y2K because it was one of the great thing in IT history.
Yeah.
We are getting some questions, Brandon, from an audience, and before I go to my next question, I want to take some of them. And I find this one very interesting. The question is from Akash, and his question is, what are some practical ways leaders can move learning from being a one-off event to becoming an everyday part of their team culture? And I believe this is an awesome question because learning cannot be taken as something that you have to do every Wednesday, or the L&D department is on top of your head asking you to join the training. It is more like that you are continuously learning something every single day, right? There are traditional ways, there are AI ways, I don't know. So what's your opinion on that? How do you think it can become part of everyday culture?
Yeah, it is a great question. Thanks, Akash, for asking that question. The interesting thing about humans at work, right, is that we have our own values. And although we in corporate learning, we're in the job of changing human behavior. That's what our job is. We're trying to train you on how to do something different or do something that you may not know how to do, and do it in a way that makes the most sense for whatever goals there are for the business. We're trying to change human behavior. And that is one of the most complex and difficult endeavors that you can take on, if you will, because a lot of what we do is we have our own personal values and we attach those values to our beliefs, and things that we believe are embedded into us. And so when you think about values, our personal values, and you think about a company's values, which usually make up their culture, they usually start with announcing these are our values. And then usually from that are leadership expectations, or how the company expects their leaders to behave. That becomes the nucleus of the organizational culture. And the hardest thing you'll ever do or attempt to do is to change someone's personal values, because those are their beliefs and they're really not going to want to change those very easily. So when you go to work at an organization, it's really important to understand the values that they've announced are important to the company and make sure that your values align. If your values don't align, you may struggle and try to adapt and try to be a part of that culture, but it's going to really be a big challenge for you. And so what workers expect in the workplace from their leaders it's really in the nuances where they see leaders demonstrating those values in action. And it's usually in the small day-to-day behaviors and what comes from them that they see whether or not their leaders are actual stewards of the culture. And if they don't see that, then there becomes a fragmentation. And so for leaders, it's critically important to understand that your responsibility, I mean, candidly, it's everyone's responsibility to be stewards of a culture, but culture starts from the top down. And so the leader of the company, the CEO, whoever that may be, needs to demonstrate in the nuances that culture and what's expected of leaders. And he or she needs to make sure that that is accountable across all levels of leadership. But it's in the small nuances day to day that are the practical things leaders can do to demonstrate the culture of the organization. So if you think back to my prior employment at Starbucks, we were very culturally focused as an organization. And we had one of our CEOs was asking once, because he had traveled all over the world to different Starbucks stores in different places around the world, which you can understand different countries have different cultures. They're not all the same. But he shared with our chief people officer at one point, he's like, all these places I've been to around the world, when I go into a Starbucks store, the culture just seems to be really consistent across. And how does that happen? And her response to him was, it happens through two things: training, because we have consistent training on what our culture represents, what our culture is, and how we expect leaders to behave within that culture and to carry the culture forward and be stewards of it. That happens in training at every level. When we immerse our senior leaders into the organization, when we immerse our frontline individual barista, for example, into the culture, they get the same, or into the organization, they get the same training. And so that's how you can get a consistent feeling of the culture across the organization, because everyone knows what our values are. Everyone can align to those values, and everyone can perform within what those values mean, because leaders are talking about it. They're showing it in the nuances, how they connect to you in a one-on-one conversation, how they connect to customers, how they show up at work, and how they develop you as an employee, and all of those things. So there's very practical ways, Akash. It's a really good question. It's not just about the training, but you embed the culture by ensuring that your leaders understand that not only must they align to the values of the organization, but they must demonstrate what those values mean to the workforce in all of the day-to-day actions that they go through. And in some regard, it's the little nuances and the little interactions you have with leaders that demonstrate whether or not they are stewards of the culture or not.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you touched upon the story of Starbucks, and I could relate with that, because when you're in the process of building the culture, or even for that matter, when you have to make sure the culture remains the same. Working with a global organization, one thing I can resonate and tell is that there is a country culture for sure, but then there is a company culture. And I think the idea is to make sure that even if there is a country culture, and we respect to that, but there has to be a continuous education, and not only education, but also the way we take actions should reflect to the company culture, so that not only the leaders, but all the employees of the organization understand that this is the culture of the company, irrespective of the country culture, and no disrespect to the country, but this is how we in this organization behave, right? And it comes through, it is not simply just sending a video or a document to them, but it is
Right.
very consistent effort. And I think it's a very large scale also, right? You need to have your culture ambassadors in those countries, so that they are also, and if they're internal people, right, finding time to educating people on the culture, right?
100%. Totally agree with you.
Awesome. We are getting so many questions right now, but before I take questions, I have a one question because you spoke about your previous organization, and I know that you worked with so many big organizations. Starbucks is one, Walmart is another one, and so big companies. So I would like to take your opinion on the big companies, and then I would like to have your advice on companies that are not big. So when we talk about big companies, right, very hard, right? L&D has a lot to do to make sure that you are able to cascade the culture, not only the culture, but also the culture of learning in the organization, right? What are the challenges, or if there is any story that you already shared one story from the Starbucks, but any other story that you wanted to share from your previous organization, Starbucks, Walmart, any other organization, where you really felt that the the learning culture has made a lot of impact on the growth of the organization? And maybe my second part of the question would be that, do you have any advice for the mid-size organization on how can they implement some of those strategies in their organization?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And one of the fundamentals I would say that, is kind of irrelevant to the size of the company, if you will. But one of the fundamentals is to establish what's expected from leadership. And in too many situations, we can find ourselves choosing leaders because maybe they look like us, or they've done a great job in the operational components, or the financial components, or whatever it may be of the organization. We really have to rethink what leadership means in an organization. And you take Walmart, for example. When I was there, I was responsible for developing leadership capability across the corporate functions and even the retail functions. And what we started with was what we call tone at the top. So what does it mean to be a leader in this organization, regardless of the level you're at? And I would say that it's more challenging to be the first level leader in an organization because you're kind of squeezed, if you will. You're needing to meet metrics or KPIs that your leaders want you to meet, but you're also directly working with customers and employees and making sure their experience is as positive as it can be. So it's really hardest at those first and second levels of leadership. But we have to take leadership more seriously than we have in the past. And a lot of the organizations I've been at haven't really focused on the broader view across the enterprise of what it means to be a leader. Sometimes in specific functions, they may create their own leadership experiences or buy off-the-shelf products and that kind of stuff just for that function or that group or even that team. So one thing I did at Walmart, we were really focused on our values. And so we had our 4 values, and those values are unchanging for the organization. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's been 5 CEOs at Walmart since its inception. And those values have been persistent across all of those CEOs. Those are unchangeable. One of them is integrity. And, and you think of the word integrity, that's kind of a broad word. It can be defined in a lot of ways in specific situations. But there is one clear thing on integrity. It is kind of, 0 or 1. You either have integrity or you don't. And so there's lots of nuances in that definition, but it's really a black and white kind of understanding of that value. And so underneath those 4 values, we architected how we expect leaders to behave. We call them leadership expectations. Now, why would we have corporate values separate from leadership expectations? It goes back to, when you set your corporate values, take the time necessary, talk to all of those people that are in the organization. Don't just create values at the leadership level. Candidly, I'd say bring in the workforce themselves and have them help you create those values. Because when you put those values on the wall or you put them digitally and share them with the workforce, those values need to capture what the company is all about and why the company exists. Okay, so those are really important. And those, you need to think of those as not changeable. So we set up leadership expectations to reinforce those values, but those are changeable because as we evolve in business, as we all know now, we're going through it all now, right? There will be changes in the business that may make us go in different directions and have different expectations of what our leaders are going to lead us through. So leadership expectations should reinforce the values, but they are changeable because you may have different dynamics in the business over different periods of time where you have to go in different directions and that kind of thing. So it's really important that we spend the time to not just go get an off-the-shelf leader development program, but to bake in those values and those leadership expectations into how we develop leaders in the organization so that they can be stewards of the culture, like I've said in the past, but also how they can be developers of others in the organization. And that's the critical missing element in so many companies right now at any size, mid-level, mid-market companies, enterprise level companies, and small businesses and startups. You must have your leaders be talent developers. Now we have these, what we call player coach leaders, a lot of times where they're in the work, they're doing the work, but they're also leading people. And so we need to give our leaders capabilities to coach and to share and to storytell and to spark curiosity, but they need to make time to learn themselves, and they need to be seen as willing to invest in learning for others. And so we can't just hope that happens, we have to enable it. And that means giving leaders practical tools to have growth conversations, reward them for growing their talent, show them that learning actually drives performance. And at one company, we embedded learning goals that I was at one of my previous companies, Home Depot. We embedded learning goals into the performance reviews. So they weren't, an HR checkbox like a lot of things we do in these performance reviews. They're a shared commitment between the leader and the team and the individual. That is how you shift big or small culture to make an impact.
Well, and I think I always believe that if you need to put your all HR budget, put it on development of your leaders, because if you are able to change the leaders to what your expectations are, and they're able to do their job, I don't think you need any HR budget to do anything else. So leaders are HR in itself, right? So and L&D can make that impact a lot, because there are a lot of investment organizations of any size is making all leadership. And Brendan, you touched upon the integration of how we should coach leaders to do the performance reviews. And there is a question that has come from Mayank, and this is a big question all over the screen. We can't see ourselves as well. So basically what he's asking is that how do we integrate learning into performance conversation and career development plan, especially during the tough conversation, like where an individual is not performing? So how do we do that is what it's asking. I'll just take this question off the screen because it's not, we are not able to see ourselves.
It's a great question. It's a great question. It goes back to my earlier conversation about developing capable leaders, right? And so one of those parts of being a leader is, the word I like to use a lot is clarity. And clarity is kindness. Kindness is clarity. Clarity is kindness. And so it's really challenging for especially new leaders to be able to have clear, effective conversations with a direct report. But I'll tell you what, if you're not able to be really clear with someone and directive with someone in a way that supports their ability to understand a deficiency or a need to get better at something, then that's actually going to be worse for that individual over time, because they're not going to be able to understand that they need to shift some of their thinking or how they perform to meet the needs and the expectations. And so it starts at not just that conversation at the end of the year. If you're having a conversation with someone and you're talking about their performance and there needs to be a shift in the performance, and you're at the end of the year in that review cycle where it actually is going to impact their incentives or their bonuses or whatever it may be, financially, then that's not, if that's a surprise to them at that point, then that's not good and you have failed as a leader. And so being able to have that conversation should be one of the first levels of training or development that you provide your leaders, because it's critically important for you as the worker to know where you stand with what you need to achieve. Now, the other challenging part of that is giving feedback. We always hear this story of feedback as a gift. Yes, feedback is a gift, but it needs to be constructive feedback. So as the leader, if you're seeing an area of improvement or an area of opportunity that's needed for the individual, then how do you help them get there? One, you need to bring it forward and have a conversation about it and be authentic about it. And that's some of the challenge that a lot of new leaders have as well, but also in a way that doesn't berate the individual or make the individual feel, that there's not the psychological safety necessary for them to have a conversation about what is expected in the workplace. So you need to be able to be okay having those direct conversations. One of the best bosses I've ever had was someone who, one, I had respect for her as an individual because she carried herself a specific way. She had knowledge, she shared knowledge, and she was brilliant at what she does, but she was also very direct. So every conversation I had with her, I knew where I stood, but she was also supportive in helping me, one, realize, okay, I've got opportunity, because guess what? We all have opportunity to improve. And so it's that, that development of trust that's first important. A lot of that trust that the leader can invoke comes through clarity and direct conversation. And so I would say that's one of the biggest skills we need to give leaders, is the ability to be real clear and be consistent in how you deliver that message, because you are impacting an individual in their career, in their future, and where they are. That's a big deal. It's a really big thing. And so I would stress that as we develop leaders, having them role play and having them understand how to have that conversation in the most effective way is critical. So it goes back to that, sometimes in these cultures that are overly kind, in that they expect their leaders to really be supporters, that's okay. That's fantastic. But clarity really is the best form of kindness that you can demonstrate as a leader.
Yeah, and Brendan, I would say that in my experience, I've seen this is the most difficult job for a manager to do, to the extent that many are really scared in giving a constructive or tough feedbacks to people when it comes. And many times I've seen that the manager expect HR to break the bad news or give these kind of feedback as opposed to they doing it. And I think it's a great shift that the manager owns their team members, and they need to make sure that they are the one who's giving any kind of feedback. So just for my audience, I wanted to recap what you said, because there's a really, really good points on how to give a constructive feedback, or for that matter, have this conversation. One was be regular on that. It cannot be a yearly activity you are doing when it comes to people's increment, because they see that you are saying all that because you don't want to give them enough salary increment. So don't do that. It has to be quick. It has to be regular. It has to be direct and clear with the expectation. And I would say that if you have some data to support what you have to say, I think it makes more sense, because people don't defy the logic, right? If you have done a lower sale, you have done a lower sale, right? There's no defy to that. And I think you also mentioned about being constructive in your feedback. And be authentic, right? People kind of catch it, whether you are giving authentic feedback. They are not fools, right? They totally understand that. And I think you give a great example of one of your colleagues from the past who was direct but still supportive, right? And you appreciate that, you remembered that, and you really think that was the right thing to do. One thing I will add into it, Brandon, I always say that also appreciate your team members as and when they do something great, right? Don't come up as always like you are the one who's trying to catch up the bad things they have done. Awesome.
And I would would add to that. I love that point you're making there. I would add that when you're going to give, positive feedback, make it meaningful. So don't do you're a great person and we love having you. Recognize the person for something they did, that's really positive. Like, thank you, Marjan, for having that great conversation with your team. It shows how effective you can be when you huddle the team and you're very direct and clear with them. You know what I'm saying? So because after a while, if you just continually praise your team, but it's not meaningful and directed at some type of activity they've done, then it's going to become actually less important to them to hear that from you.
I totally get that. Right? I'm a great believer of what you just said. Right? It has to be with the incidents that has happened and why your appreciation is an appreciation. Awesome. Brandon, I want to continue this conversation for a long period of time. We are already up a little bit on the time, but and I could see a huge line of questions. My own questions are there, but I'm still trying to give priority to the questions from audience. But I'll take the last one because I think this one is really something that our audience should listen to. And I could see that a lot of questions that you've already answered, by the way, in some or other form. So I'll take this question from Vibha, and she's asking, what trends do you see shaping the future of learning culture in the organization? And I think that I would like to also know from you, right? You've been working with multiple organizations in the past and through Docebo also. So I'm sure people must be coming to you about that, and you have so much of vast experience. Where do you see this is going? What do you think are the trends for the future learning culture in the organization?
Well, we are at what I would call an inflection point in some respect, right? And so how we make decisions now will largely impact how our organizations operate in the future, because we are at a shift in the very meaning of work, what work means for individuals, and how we extract joy from the work we do. I mean, we're all asking these questions, especially since COVID. We had a once in a century global pandemic that killed millions of people, and we still haven't completely recovered from the psychological and social impact of that. And so right now, what we're doing, right now we're talking about AI every day, and AI is the thing, and it's this and it's that. But if you look back in our history, we always try to capture the essence of the moment with something like that we can hold on to as our guidance mechanism for the future, right? Well, AI is going to be a means to an end to helping us re-architect work itself. And this inflection point is an opportunity for us to think about, we can go in multiple directions with this. Are we going to go in the direction that amplifies humanity and that looks at humanity in a different light and enables us to reconstruct and re-architect work so that it can be better for humans? Or are we going to not focus on the humanity of the work, but just drive productivity and efficiency with the transformation of AI at the center, and whatever happens to humans happens to humans? And so we have that ability and that opportunity, and it is a big opportunity to decide which way we go. And that decision hasn't been made yet. And so that's why we talk about leadership development, really driving the culture of the organization and choosing your leaders very carefully and making sure that you are real intentional about what your expectations from leadership is, or, from leaders, what that expectation is, because we have this opportunity to redefine and re-architect the future of work. And we're living in a pandemic of anxiety right now. If you look at the workforce, everyone's worried and concerned about what AI may do to their jobs, which affects their families, their communities, and the world at large, right? So I don't want to make it like apocalyptic, but we have a really important set of decisions in front of us as we are seeing the exponential advancement of transformation that AI is bringing us. And so do we have a responsibility to the humans in the workforce? And if we do have that responsibility, what is that responsibility? Do we have accountability to the humans in the workforce? And so I think those are the big questions right now in this shift. Satya Nadella just yesterday or the other day at Build was talking about this is a platform shift. And I would say that this is a really larger than a platform in some regard. It is a shift in how we look at what work is and what we want out of work. And so then as we architect that future, what's left for humans, what should we be doing, and how should we change how the work is done? So it's a big moment for us, and it's a great opportunity for us at all levels to make sure that we are able to speak to our leaders and those who are making decisions about what we want from work.
Yeah, and I think change is the only constant. So today we have AI, tomorrow we might have something else. So we have to consciously work on the learning culture. And I think the learning culture will never go away. What are we learning might differ from time to time and the way things are shaping up. The world has changed a lot, and it is changing much faster than it used to change in the past. Today, the changes are so fast.
The great thing about that is we have had major transformations throughout our past. They may not have moved as fast, to your point. There's usually been time in these large, like agriculture to industrial, all these different these eras that have changed. We've usually had more time to adjust. And so I think that's the critical point, is that it's exponentially faster than it's ever been. But we are humans. We're very adaptable. We're very agile. But we all need a voice in what this new world of work is going to do and bring for us. And we have to have a way to amplify that voice so that we're not just looking at 3 or 4 rich billionaires to make decisions for us in what the future of work means. Right.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It was such a great conversation. I couldn't stop myself. I know that we are a little bit more, but I think it's worth having that conversation. There are so many questions from audience. I really apologize to all those who I could not take it. But as Brendan promised, he might find some time to go to the recorded version and answer some of your questions there.
Yeah.
Brendan, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being on the show and interacting with our audience and sharing your experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I couldn't have found a better person than you to talk about learning and how it could embed to the culture.
No, thank you again for the great conversation. Thanks to everyone who joined today. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll answer as many of these questions as I can. We can keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, you should always check what you ask for. So I think you're going to be flooded with the LinkedIn request now.
No worries.
Prepared for that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. This was Brendan Carson, the Chief Learning Officer of Toshiba, with us, sharing his experience from the past, and comes with a lot of decades of experience, I must say. Great for all the experienced people who really wants to build a learning culture in the organization. And at Incredible Workplaces, we do believe that learning cultures are one of the greatest culture that you can build. So once again, thank you to Brendan, and let's see you and meet you in the next episode that we have. Till then, goodbye, and thank you very much for joining from my side. And Brendan, have a nice day.
Bye-bye.